We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. John Harris with the Tennessee Firearms Association with us. Always a good conversation. John, I always learn something from you every time you come on. I really do. He knows his stuff, and I really appreciate. He's a friend and a good friend to the show. Listen, we've got a couple calls that waited through the break. Let's take a call from Ed for John. Ed, good morning. Do you have a question or comment?
Good morning, Nick.
Hey, Ed.
Good morning, guest.
Good morning.
That surprised me about the statute here in Tennessee, basically saying to these looters, come on in. As long as that looter don't attempt to get near the owner, well, hell, they got free reign. Now, my thought was, and I thought the law was, when they get into your business, you can't do anything outside the business. But once they're inside the business, they're fair game. And just like here, somebody trying to break into my house, and it's me and my wife here, but they try to break into my house. Man, they're open season.
What do you think, John? I mean, I hear him talking, and I got to be honest with you. I know the law, and I don't know exactly how it works, but if I'm on a jury, and I know someone broke into a home of Ed and his wife, and they were in there, and Ed and his wife feared, and they killed him, I'm not convicting Ed. I'm sorry. I'm just not.
Well, and part of the problem is Ed's going to have to go through the cost and expense of a trial to get to that jury is one problem, okay? The other is we've got all of these little conditions in our statute that exist that are not consistent with the average person's understanding of what their rights are. And that's a dangerous situation to be in when the criminal code, something that could put you in prison for a long time, isn't written in such a fashion that it aligns with what most people think the law is or should be. And that's what I've heard it myself. I go in, I teach these classes, I do your shows, and I've heard, for decades now, if you have to shoot them in the yard, drag them inside. Well, the cops are going to follow the blood trail.
Yeah.
But at the same time, even if you shoot them inside, the district attorney could present facts which overcome that presumption that you would have been justified even in your own home using deadly force.
Yeah, and let's be clear too. I think I know how you feel about this, and I heard what Ed said, but the rules are in place and the laws as they are for a purpose on the other side of this. I mean, you don't want willy-nilly people then kind of playing judge and jury themselves as a looter runs from a store or a robber from your home, and then you chase them out in the street and you gun them down in the back. I mean, some people may say, well, why not? He robbed from me. Well, again, it's a property crime. There's no fear for your own life. You shouldn't use, that's part of the point here, and I don't want it to sway too far one way or the other, but there's a reason these rules are on the books. So I think for nothing else, maybe to prevent the possibility of vigilante justice.
Oh, absolutely. That's absolutely the case. But the rules have gone much further than that. And what the legislature has written and allowed to continue to exist goes much further than that, such that I think it really doesn't reconcile with what people believe. For example, in Ed's situation, the statute actually says the presumption of, even in your own home, only applies even if they break in with force, and even if they break in maliciously. If you're in your own home but you're engaged in some kind of illegal conduct, let's say I don't know, you're stealing cable TV services, or your grass is higher than Metro Code allows.
Yeah.
If the DA can point to any illegal activity that occurred, there's now an appellate decision on this. At or about the time that you resorted to deadly force, the DA could argue that you had a duty now under our statute to run out the back door, to retreat, to do everything possible but use deadly force in your own home. And it turns entirely on this concept of what does illegal activity mean. And unfortunately, the Court of Appeals has said that the legislature did such a poor job in defining that term that it could mean anything that would constitute illegal activity. If you're in your car, for example, it could be driving without insurance or expired tags, or a revoked license that would make the difference between justifiable use of deadly force and not.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this, John, and you give me your idea of how you would handle it. If you were a merchant there on 2nd and Broad and you knew they were coming, you knew what they were up to, and you know the law as you just did and the headaches that come with it, I'm just guessing, I suppose what I would do is set up a bunch of giant cameras and say, come on in, guys, because I'm going to take your picture. And as we've seen, Metro's been going around picking up a lot of these folks that were involved in some of the illegal activity. But what would you do if you're there and you know they're coming? You have guns, you have cameras. How would you handle it?
I think the best thing you can do is what some merchants have done is they've as a business, they've hired security companies that have training on when they can use deadly force and when they can't. And they've got enough of a presence of resistance to discourage and dissuade a looter. Because what is clear is, as a property owner, as a merchant, you can use non-lethal force. You can physically push them back, push them out, and resist them. You just can't use deadly force.
So you can take a Louisville slugger. You can take a Louisville slugger to their kneecap.
Well, as long as it's not classified as a deadly weapon.
It's a baseball bat. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, under the statute that we have, the one that applies here,
yeah,
it's a club is the term that's in the statute, is the same deadly force element as a firearm.
Yeah. Okay, and I can see that. So I guess, and what do you think of the idea too of this? I mean, yeah, I agree. You secure your establishment as best you can. If you have the foresight, you have security guards, but I guess security cameras and video and prominently displayed, knowing that if they come in, their pictures are going to be caught, and you've already seen it. The Metro is going around identifying many of those that were caught on camera and making arrests. We've seen about a half a dozen so far. What do you think? I mean, is that, again, a deterrent, I suppose, even though that gang mentality, when they start running and looting, I don't even think they stop to think.
Well, it is something that I think you need to seriously look at. Sort of the downside, and the merchant doesn't have any control over this, is the looters that come in, wearing hoods and masks, like the Antifa, makes it more difficult to identify them. Then you have the problem of are the police going to track them down over property thefts and go through the expense and effort of trying to identify them off video footage. And then even if they do and they're lucky enough to find them and arrest them, is our DA going to prosecute them?
Yeah.
And we've seen, I think, 2 stories already where the DA has decided to drop charges on some people that the police did arrest for damaging patrol cars. So you've got that whole continuum. But from the merchant's perspective, to minimize the loss, the damage, and the impact, they can have security. They can have, it doesn't even have to be professional security. It might just be them and some of their, bouncers, so to speak. They can't use deadly force, but they can use force. They can put barricades. They could park vehicles in front of their buildings. They could use security cameras and security footage. There's a lot of stuff they could do. They could use tasers. They could use stun guns. There's a whole spectrum of things they could do. They can't use a firearm.
Point taken. John, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it. That was an interesting conversation. I think a lot of people were wondering about that. By the way, as we wrap things up, we should talk about a mutual friend of ours who passed away just within the past week. And Buford Toon was a good friend, and he sure knew his guns. And I know he was an original member of the Firearms Association, was he not?
He was one of the 12 that helped us form it a quarter century ago. Yeah, he will be greatly missed.
Yeah, a nice man, and thoughts and prayers to his family. John, listen, thank you for joining us. We'll see you soon, my friend. Keep in touch, all right?
Thank you very much.
You be safe. That's John Harris, Tennessee Firearms Association, and some good things to think about. And he's right. As he ended that, you're wondering, well, gee, is there anything I can do? Well, yeah, deadly force is not the end all. I mean, mace, pepper spray, if you have guards out there as a deterrent, all of those things can come into play as well. But yeah, it's a tough situation. The good news on this, since last Saturday, There have been several protests, and there will be more rallies. But since then, nothing that's escalated to that level of violence. And certainly in general, even with that Saturday compared to what we've seen in other cities, Nashville, I think, has maintained its composure to a degree, at least compared to what we've seen in other cities, though any amount of looting or vandalism is too much. Listen, we'll take a break. I'll be back with a programming note about tomorrow right after this.